Please welcome Ashley Whillans.
Thank you, John, and it's a real pleasure to be here. John's work has been very influential. I read his first book, and it inspired actually my master's thesis, which examined the relationship between time, money, and environmental behavior. That's not what I'm going to talk about today, but it's such a pleasure to be here and to be surrounded by people that have been so instrumental in my thinking over the course of my early academic career. So I'm excited to share some of what I've been working on during my PhD. Let's see here. So as John mentioned here, I'm going to keep time in the spirit of being on time here. Hold on one second. I study the relationship between time, money, and happiness, and in particular, I'm very interested in how the trade-offs that we make between time and money can impact our well-being. So we might not often recognize this, but the way that we spend our money often impacts our time, and the way that we spend our time often impacts our ability to make money. So my research really aims at the intersection of these two concepts. And this research comes out of a line of work examining whether, when, and how we can spend our money in order to maximize happiness. So there is an adage that money cannot buy happiness, but our lab likes to explore whether, when, and how money can indeed impact our well-being, sometimes positively and sometimes negatively. So there's some research suggesting that money does buy happiness to some point. However, after our basic needs are met, having more money no longer impacts the amount that we laugh or smile on a given day. Of course, however, this research has all been conducted with, the middle income, the kind of meaty part of the income distribution. So our colleagues wanted to interrogate this idea further. So what about millionaires? Surely being a millionaire should lead to greater happiness. So they asked a group of 2,000 millionaires to rate their happiness with life on a scale from 1 to 10. And they had really 4 income brackets here. So they had 2,000 millionaires, people, with $1 to $2 million in the bank, all the way up to people with over $10 million in the bank. So what do you think that they found? Do you think that, show of hands if you think that the richer people were, the happier they were? That's also what the millionaires thought in this study. But as it turns out, there was only a slight uptick in life satisfaction for the very wealthiest in this study. So there was no difference in overall life satisfaction for someone with $1 million versus $8 million in the bank. And for people with over $10 million, there was just a very, very small benefit of having that much money on happiness. However, much like your intuitions here, the millionaires all thought that having more money would lead to greater happiness. So those with $1 million said, if I just had more money, I would be more satisfied with my life. And similarly, those with $10 million thought, if I just had more money, I would be more satisfied with my life. So this leaves open the possibility, the fact that we don't see consistent relationships between wealth and well-being, that what we do with our money may play just as important a role in our happiness as how much money we have and how much money we make. So in particular, I'm interested in looking at how we might be able to spend our money in order to change the way that we spend our time. So spending money in order to maximize the way that we spend our time. The first way that I'm going to talk about that we've examined in our research is that we can use money to strengthen our social connections. There's been some research in our lab specifically looking at the relationship between using our money to help others and happiness. This was one of my advisor's seminal papers published in Science in 2008. And what she did is she descended upon the UBC campus here. That's where I'm a graduate student, beautiful campus. And she handed students, unsuspecting students at the beginning of the day, $5 or $20. However, there was a catch, of course. Students were randomly assigned to spend that $5 or $20 on themselves, or they were randomly assigned to spend that $5 or $20 on others. At the end of the day, we followed up with students in our study and asked them what they had bought and how happy they felt. Students who were asked to spend money on themselves bought things like makeup, food, earrings, jewelry. Students who were assigned to spend money on others ate out with friends, they donated to their favorite charity, and they enjoyed spending time with their friends on campus over drinks. And what we found was that students at the end of the day who were assigned to spend money on others were significantly happier than students who were assigned to spend money on themselves. But interestingly, so this seems intuitive, I think all of us here would say, yeah, spending money on others, of course that makes us happier. Students didn't share that intuition. So when we asked a separate group of students, what condition would make you happiest if you had $5 or $20 to spend on yourself, or $5 or $20 to spend on others? Students were like, $20 for myself, of course. That would definitely make me the happiest. So it seems that we're not always correct in the way that we think about how spending our money might maximize our happiness. We've recently took these findings under the skin to examine how spending money on others might also impact physical health. So in this study, we recruited adults over the age of 65 who were previously diagnosed with high blood pressure. We randomly assigned this group of adults to spend $120 on themselves or $120 on others for 3 weeks over a course of a 6-week study, and we measured their blood pressure before, during, and after they spent their study payments. So everyone, let's be clear, everyone in the study enjoyed receiving $120. And people in the personal spending condition bought things like new sweaters, massages, and miracle face cream. That's a description from one of our participants. And people who were randomly assigned to spend money on others bought the ingredients to make muffins for firefighters, once again, straight from our participants. They made charitable donations, and they bought toys for their grandkids. So although everyone liked receiving money in this study, we found no change in blood pressure over the course of the study for individuals who were assigned to spend money on themselves. However, for individuals who were randomly assigned to spend money on others, they showed significant reductions in systolic and diastolic blood pressure over the course of the study, and the magnitude of these effects were similar to aerobic exercise program. So starting a new aerobic exercise program. So one maybe a potentially alternative way of improving your physical health other than going to the gym. I would suggest both, probably, if I had to make a suggestion. So these findings provide some of the strongest evidence to date that spending money on others can also improve physical health. And relevant to the conference here today, our colleagues have also shown that people who spend time and money helping others also feel less pressed for time. So interestingly, giving away our most precious resources, so giving away our time and giving away our money, actually makes us feel like we have more of it, because we feel as if we have it to give away, so it makes us feel efficacious. It makes us feel like we are in control of our lives and in control of our time. These effects also were due in part to reductions in stress, and we saw that these effects were strongest for close friends. So again, this goes back to the idea that using money to change the way we spend our time by strengthening our social connections might be a very profitable pathway from money to health and happiness. And these findings show that not only is charitable giving good for our hearts or heartwarming, it's also good for our hearts. So that's just a little an aside. So the second set of findings I'm going to be talking about is that we might be able to use money to change the way we spend our time by deliberately making the choice of giving up money in order to have more and better time. So each and every day, as I was talking about at the beginning of the talk, we make decisions about time and money. Even coming to the conference, we might have made the decision to take a direct flight as opposed to an indirect flight where we're waiting in the airport for hours. And this morning, we might have chosen to go to a cafe without a line, sip on a foamy latte, or wait in line for the free coffee. And each and every day, we make decisions both that affect our overall structure of our lives and affect the moments that the happiness of our moments on a day-to-day basis. So I really wanted to understand how these trade-offs that we make between time and money can impact our happiness. So in this, we conducted 6 studies with nearly 5,000 adults across Canada, in Europe, in the United States. And we asked people a very simple question. Were they more like Tina or more like Maggie? So these were gender balanced, but this is just an example. So we said that Tina valued her time more than her money. She is willing to sacrifice money to have more time. Whereas Maggie values her money more than her time. She's willing to sacrifice time to have more money. So we asked everyone in our across our 6 studies this simple question. Are you willing to give up money to have more time? Are you willing to give up time to have more money? And we found across these studies a pretty even split with a slight preference for time. So people across our studies, 58% of them said that they were more like Tina, they wanted time over money, and 43% said they were more like Maggie, they wanted money over time. Interestingly, there was little to no influence of demographic characteristics that you might think would matter in predicting people's orientations. So whether people were men or women, their income and their marital status didn't seem to impact whether people chose time over money. So interestingly, among the richest and the least rich people in our studies, they were equally as likely to choose time over money. So this orientation didn't seem to be impacted by how much time or money people felt like they had right now. We did, however, find an influence of age. As you might expect, older individuals were more likely to say that they would rather have time over money, which of course makes sense. And we found that this orientation was relatively stable over the 2 time periods we measured this orientation, so over both 2-week and 3-month testing intervals, suggesting that people's orientations to choose time over money or money over time are relatively stable, at least in the time course that we examined. And our simple single item measure also did a really pretty good job at explaining how people spent their time. So we found that people who valued time over money spent less time working, they spent more time volunteering, and they were more politically engaged. So individuals who had a preference to give up money in order to have more time also spent time in ways that seemed to align with more pro-social values. They were even more likely to choose a house cleaning service versus a cash prize as an incentive for participation in our study. Of course, the house cleaning will buy you out of a couple terrible hours on the weekend scrubbing your toilet bowls, so it seems that people who prioritize time over money also are making daily decisions that have downstream implications for happiness. We also saw in a group of college students that their orientations predicted the likelihood that they said that they would want to have a lower starting salary and work fewer hours. So we presented students with hypothetical situations, and people who said they had an orientation to choose time over money, these students wanted to graduate, work fewer hours, and make less money. So that this seemed to predict what students wanted out of their lives. And of course, we wanted to examine how these orientations shape people's happiness. We, across all these studies, quantify happiness by asking people. And it really is, we look at three separate facets of happiness: people's overall satisfaction with their lives, how much positive emotion they experience on a day-to-day basis, and how much negative emotion they experience on a day-to-day basis. And what we found was that people who prioritize time over money experienced greater life satisfaction, and that these results held controlling for time and material affluence. So it wasn't just that, wanting stuff was predicting these happiness benefits. We know that materialism has negative impacts for well-being, but these results are above and beyond any effects of materialism: age, gender, income, the number of kids at home, and the number of hours worked. We also saw that people who prioritize time over money experience more frequent positive emotions in their day-to-day lives, and less frequent negative emotions in their day-to-day life. So overall, we see that people's general orientation to predict time over money influence all critical aspects of their subjective well-being. We're now following up with our college students, so I'm currently running a study with 3,000 college students longitudinally to examine how these orientations develop during critical periods in students' lives, so during the transition from college to the workforce, and how these orientations shape the kinds of jobs that students take, as well as their well-being over time, to to really begin to examine how these orientations shape the decisions, the major life decisions that we make. The last way in which we can use money to change and shape the way that we spend our time is by using our discretionary income to buy ourselves time, such as by purchasing time-saving services. So with the rise of the sharing economy, companies like TaskRabbit have made it increasingly possible for people to use their discretionary income to change the way they spend their time, such as by hiring someone to do the house cleaning or to rapid mail Christmas presents to their entire extended family during the holidays. So we asked a group of participants, about 6,000, whether there was a task that they dreaded. I'm sure we can all have one in our minds, a task that we have to do that is maybe not the most pleasant. And we asked people whether or not they spent money to delegate any task that they disliked doing. So across 6 studies, we found that people who use money to buy time by delegating their disliked tasks to others reported greater happiness, greater social connection, and greater meaning in life. And it's worth noting that these results were actually stronger for the Netherlands. So our sample of people living in the Netherlands who reported using these time-saving services, they experienced greater happiness and a greater willingness to use these services than in the United States. I know that culture has been something we've been talking a lot about at this conference. We've also found evidence in a study with almost 34,000 Americans that asked whether these Americans had used time-saving services. We found that people, on days where people used these time-saving services, they reported greater end-of-day happiness, and this was especially true on the weekends. And in part because using these time-saving services allowed people to spend time in happier ways, such as by spending more of their time socializing. So it's maybe not even enough that we use money to change the way we spend our time. We also have to spend that time in happier ways, such as socializing with our friends and family and spending time with people that we care about. We also see, and this is something that I had a conversation about with several of you yesterday, that there is a reluctance to give up money to have more and better time. Across all of our studies, despite the fact that people who gave up their discretionary income to have more time reported greater happiness, only 17% of people across our studies reported using these time-saving services. And it isn't just that people feel like they can't afford it. So even in a sample of almost 900 millionaires, only a small majority report using these time-saving services, suggesting that there are barriers that prevent people from giving up money to change the way they spend their time. Maybe it's just that people, in this case, can't think of tasks that they need help with. So when we asked our nationally representative sample, if you could outsource one task that you dread doing through one of these time-saving services, what would it be? And 99.1% of our nationally representative sample said they could definitely think of something that they dislike doing that they could use a time-saving service to get rid of. Cleaning, household maintenance, shopping were all at the top. A few people said outsourcing, spending time with their significant other. Take that for what it's worth. But definitely this doesn't seem to be the case. Yeah, I don't have that represented on the slide, but there's definitely some funny comments in this survey. But maybe it's just that people don't expect to save enjoyable time, so they just think that they would spend that time working, so what's the point of giving up my hard-earned money to have more time if I'm just going to be busy and stressed with that time? So when we asked our nationally representative sample of Americans, what would you spend this time doing? People said relaxing, hobbies, a few people said work, but really people were like, hey, nothing was also really popular, yeah. People said that they could definitely think of more positive ways in which they would spend that time. So it doesn't seem that it's just a matter that people can't think of what they would want to delegate or they can't think of how they would spend that time in more enjoyable ways. So we see that 99% of people in this nationally representative sample say they can think about what they would want to get rid of, what tasks they would want to get rid of. But only 17% across most of our studies, excluding the millionaires, they're a non-representative sample for the most part, say that they can think of something that they would want to give up to save them time. So what are some potential barriers, other barriers then, to using time-saving services to help us cope with the demands in our everyday life? So we've explored a few, including future time slack, people value money over time, and opportunity and cost neglect, which I'll talk about each in turn quickly. So this idea of future time slack sounds jargony, but once I explain it, it will all become very clear and will feel personally relevant, probably. So in the present moment, we know we have a million things to do. Our schedule today is packed. John is trying to keep us on time. He knows that there's a million things on our calendar for today. And that's true during a conference, not during a conference. We know we have a million things to do today. However, the calendars of tomorrow seem relatively free. So in the future, we think we're always going to have more time than we do in the present moment. So one thing that we've been exploring to encourage people to give up money in order to have more time, such as by buying time-saving services, is by making the free future feel a little bit more like the busy present. So one thing that we did is we ran a study with TaskRabbit, the company I was talking about earlier, with 80,000 people off their mailing list. And we randomly assigned TaskRabbit customers to one of 3 email subject lines. And the last one is the important one. So it says, you want 2 hours, exactly 1 week in the future. So this has been shown before to make people feel as if the future is going to be as busy as today. So we emailed these people at their desk at 10 a.m. on a busy Thursday, and everyone can think, I would really like 2 free hours today. And then they use that to project into the future. So by linking the current present moment to the seemingly free future, you can encourage people to use money to buy themselves time. So indeed, we did find that people in this study were significantly more likely to click the email, so that's that big bar, and they were significantly more likely to go to the TaskRabbit website and actually intend to make a purchase when they were reminded that their time in the future would be as busy as it is right now. Another barrier that we've talked about, and we talked a little bit about yesterday, is this idea of thinking that our time is worth money, that we equate our time with making money. So across all of these studies, we've found pervasive effects of people who are paid by the hour, for whom the value of their time is very salient to them in their daily lives. So across all of our studies, we see that people who are paid by the hour are much less likely to use time-saving services. They maybe can't rationalize. They can really think of the value of their own time, and they want to make money with that time, not give up money in order to have more time. So this time as money thinking seems to be detrimental to getting people to using time-saving services that could help them deal with some of the time stress in their everyday lives. The last barrier is something called opportunity and cost neglect. But really, we fail to recognize that by not working or by not doing all of our household chores, but getting some help for those, that we could actually be spending that time in more enjoyable ways. People are really bad at making that recognition that by working more, we're actually giving something up. We're giving up time that we could spend with our friends, with our family, enjoying our hobbies. So we ran a study where we asked participants, that's at Science World in Vancouver, we asked them to imagine that they were having a very busy week, one of the busiest weeks they've had all year. And we told them that they could outsource 2 hours of their chores and errands to someone else for $40. And we just asked people in the control condition, what would you do? Would you do these tasks yourself? Would you use the outsourcing service? In our opportunity cost condition, we just simply reminded people that by spending by using the outsourcing service, that they could spend that time doing something else. They could spend those 2 hours with friends or family. And we found that people who were simply reminded that they would be able to do something else better with that time were much more likely to say that they would use the time-saving service. So just helping people realize that they could be spending more enjoyable time by not working or by using these time-saving services seems to help people make better time-use decisions or be more willing to give up money in order to have more and better time. So right now, as part of my PhD, I'm also looking at the trade-offs that people make related to time and money in terms of commuting. So whether people are willing to take a toll bridge or to not pay the toll and take longer. So we know commuting is one of our biggest pain points in terms of time. So we're examining some of these questions with some companies in Boston. So we're looking at how can we encourage employees to engage in more active forms of commuting, which sometimes take a bit more time, but also can improve happiness and health for employees. So that's an upcoming project. And we're also doing some work with the Social and Behavioral Sciences team in the federal government and the New South Wales government, looking at how workplaces can encourage employees to engage in activities such as active commuting or taking the flex time policies that are available in some of these workplace contexts. So I just want to finish my talk with a video that I think is cute that was covering some of this research, just to kind of get us, excited as we continue on for the day. So I'm just going to play this.
If you rack up some overtime at work, take some time off. Don't take the money because new findings suggest you'll be happier for it. The research shows that about half of us
I would take the money.
value money over time,
I'll take more money on my paycheck.
while the other half
To me, happiness is the experiences that we have.
value time over money.
Because you can never get time back. You can always earn more money, but you can never get time.
The newly published findings out of UBC involved surveys with close to 5,000 people and found that those that value time the most are significantly happier.
We found evidence that it's
Just me again,
similar
sorry.
in magnitude to having a higher level of education and about half the effect of being married, which we also know is good for life satisfaction and well-being.
Around the skating rink, most people already seem to know it.
I love the people I work with and stuff, but obviously extra day off with family and enjoying time with my kids.
But the same research also showed younger respondents were more likely to measure happiness in dollars and cents.
Lots of money.
Turns out it's something most of us do learn over time.
It's not about what you have. It's about this, spending time with your children, being outdoors, and just enjoying life.
So it may take these kids a while to figure it out, but it turns out the data is in. Time makes you happier than money. Kent Mulgat, CTV News, Kelowna.
So although our good friend Benjamin Franklin said to remember that time is money, our lab likes to suggest a revision to this idea that money can buy happier time. So thanks.